This is your host, Ghazala Alam. Welcome to my podcast, The Ebb and Flow of Life. The topic of discussion today is grief. I have been through grief. I lost my husband 15 years ago due to renal failure. He was only 55 years old. A common theme among people who have lost their spouse is the debilitating effects of feeling entirely alone and incomplete. The sense of feeling that you have lost an essential part of yourself is both painful and disconcerting. The world suddenly looked like a different place, often odd and distanced. I was not sure how to cope with life in general, and sometimes even wondered if I wanted to try. To add to all of this, another incident happened. Javed was a real estate investor. You probably have heard of the housing marketing crash of 2008. I knew nothing at all about real estate. I tried to manage his business but failed miserably. The depressing reality for me, and probably for thousands of others, was that a lifetime of savings had been mostly wiped out. This period of my life was a very dark one. I felt I was taken away from the pinnacle of a mountain and placed in a dungeon. I felt my life would never ever be normal again. My sons, my family, and the community were my support group and played a vital role in my life. A new definition of normality was established eventually. My guest today is Dr. Abdul G. Kassi. Dr. Kassi is a retired medical doctor and a non-practicing barrister. Co-host is my daughter-in-law, Mahvish Alam. No matter if you are the one grieving or are close to someone who is coping with grief, this podcast may be a good lesson. Dr. Kassi offers helpful insights for those who have witnessed grief. Good morning, Dr. Kassi, and good morning, Mahvish.
Good morning, Dr. Kassi. On behalf of my mother-in-law, Ghazala Alam, and myself, I welcome you to the podcast, Ebb and Flow of Life.
Good day to all the viewers, Abdul G and Mahvish.
Our topic today is grief. Dr. Kassi, what is grief?
Grief is overpowering and severe emotion. Grief is personal reaction to the loss of a loved one, also caused by the breakdown of long-term relationship, diagnosis of long-term illness, loss of independence from enduring disability, job loss, and loss due to theft have similar effects in varying degrees. The features of grief may differ in each person. Grief has a devastating impact on life. For example, feeling numbness, disruption in daily life, and inability to function normally.
What are the features of grief?
We need to know grief is natural reaction to loss. Personal experience and response to suffering vary depending on the nature of the loss. Grief is intense and has sequence of stages to follow for a certain period. Grief is unique. We like sharing it with those who can show compassion, empathy without lessening it. Grief can become complicated and persistent and needs special attention and support.
Dr. Kassi, you use the term without someone lessening it. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, remarks like sorry, time will heal the pain, or be brave have no worth in the situation. So let the bereaved person handle grief in their own time, because a bereaved person has to move forward with grief rather than live in complicated grief. The bereaved person needs empathy, sympathy, compassion, and support in times of grief. Beware, there is a possibility of grief becoming complicated grief, characterized by an enduring obsession with the deceased. In such a situation, therapy is a powerful tool of healing.
I've heard about complicated grief. What is it exactly?
In his 2021 article, psychologist Brown has extensively covered complicated grief. There are many good books available on this topic. Complicated grief is when we are stuck in specific thoughts and feelings of acute grief. and there is a sense of separation from the loved one and the loss of normality in life. There is a longing for a loving touch. Socially, we feel disorientated due to the lack of physical and emotional bond. Profound feelings of sadness, loneliness, fear, anxiety, guilt, resentment, anger, and shame overshadows our life. Here it is essential to seek professional help. I hope this answers your question.
There are 4 or 5 stages of grief. Could you explain those, please?
Mahvish, it is usually perceived that grief has 4 stages. According to some authors, the bereaved person goes through more than 4 stages of grief. The answer to your question is long. Please bear with me. First, we need to know that grief is a prolonged process towards recovery, which must go through stages. At each stage, we modify while understanding our emotion to reach normality in life. Therefore, knowing that every cloud has a silver lining is essential. Each stage has its own set of emotions. Beware, there will be amplification of some stages that may hit us simultaneously. So please see these stages as a guideline. Now let us come to the stages. Number 1, denial and shock. Denial is due to stunned disbelief. We may initially deny the reality of loss to avoid the pain that overwhelms us. However, it is a vital stage of grief and may last for weeks. Here the primary emotions are lamenting, sadness, confusion, and discomfort. Number 2, pain and guilt. After the shock, the feeling of agonizing and intolerable pain ensues. We should fully experience the pain without hiding it or avoiding it by taking drugs and alcohol. These are the only temporary patches. Guilt and remorse are part of grief, as we question what we did or did not do with our loved ones in time of need. At this stage, life is chaotic, scary, and we face emotions like sadness, guilt, desperation, and betrayal. 3. Anger and bargaining. Anger kicks in when we lash out and place unwarranted blame for the death on someone else. Please control this, as permanent damage to your close relationships may happen. You may protest to fate, "Why me?" as a way of despair and bargaining in vain, trying to deal with the nature, "I will never drink again," or become more religious or a better person, etc. If you bring my loved one back, if you are ready for grief counseling, it is the best time to consider it. We see anger, resentment, bargaining, and stubbornness as primary emotions. 4. Depression, reflection, and loneliness. Despite some normality returning to life, a long shadow of sadness hangs around us at this stage. Of course, it is depressing, as we all realize the true extent of our loss at this stage. To cope with the situation, we purposefully may isolate ourselves and reflect on the memories of the loved one. Consequently, we may feel a sense of loneliness. The primary emotion at play are depression, enormity, defeat, and frustration. 5. The upward turn and revival. At this stage, the adjustment to life and normalizing life without a loved one begins, becoming calmer and more organized. We will start seeing the positive aspect of life, building a new life and normality. Here, the emotions like positive form of strength, motivation, and awakening in reviving your energy. 6. Reconstruction and becoming functional. In this stage, we seek realistic solutions in life. Then we make independent, pragmatic financial reconstruction in the new life. The guiding emotion here are inspiration, determination, and refreshing. Number 7, acceptance and hope. Acceptance does not mean getting instant happiness. However, Considering the pain and chaos we have been through will provide a way to plan our future as we realize to accept the reality of our loss. However, our life may not be the same before, but simultaneously, we will be in a better frame of mind, seeking joy in life. The supporting emotion here are hope, comfort, relaxation, and security. I hope, Mahvish, I answered your question.
Wow, that was a lot more than I could have even thought of. But to sum up your answer, denial and shock, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, reflection and loneliness, the upward turn and revival, the reconstruction and becoming functional, the acceptance and hope, they're all right there. They can be possible for everyone. Right, Dr. Kassi? You earlier said, excuse me, you earlier said we don't move from grief. We move forward with it. What does that mean?
It means that the model of 7 stages of grief does not end at specific points after the death of a loved one. Reminders and reawakening grief often bring back the pain of loss for some years. Thus, we live with it and move on.
Could you elaborate on the reminders and awakening of grief?
After the loss, years later, we will repeatedly face grief over the loss as reminders like death anniversaries, birthdays, and other memorial events we once shared with the loved one. However, please do not see it as a setback. On the contrary, it only reflects the importance of the loved one's life you shared. Therefore, use these reminders as a part of healing process. Reminders will inevitably come from everywhere, like visiting the grave, new events like wedding of the children, and even memorial services of others. Even the sight, music, food loved by the deceased can bring back emotions. Therefore, it is essential to feel and handle emotions with emotional intelligence.
What is awakening grief?
Mahvish, this is an important question and thanks for asking. When confronted with reminders of the loved one, emotions of loss, sadness will overcome us, even years later. Therefore, we must take steps to cope with the situation, be prepared for it, and plan distractions like visiting friends and family more often. Also, remember our past relationship and think about the positive things we both shared. Finally, write a memorial letter to the loved one and keep adding memories to it. Give donation to the charity of the loved one who supported it and celebrate their birthdays or plant a tree in their name. Also, extend your connections with the special friends of loved one. Join and help the bereavement support groups. Please allow yourself to feel various feelings about the loss. However, in meantime, enjoy life with happiness. Naturally, sometimes there will be a laugh or a cry. If the grief becomes too intense and interferes with your daily life, it is a sign that your suffering has become complicated and you need professional help. Thank you, Ghazala Ji, Mahvish, and thank you, viewers. I appreciate your participation.